The GPS DairyCAST features the high-value insights of the GPS Dairy Consulting team's trusted advisors and the owners and managers from the elite dairy farms they serve. These conversations deliver on the GPS Dairy Consulting promise to inspire change and grow leaders.
Hello and welcome to this GPS DairyCast. I'm Peggy Coffeen from the Up-Level Dairy Podcast, serving as your host. And I'm coming to you today from the 2023 GPS Leaders Forum. And our guests today are Dr. Luiz Ferraretto from UW-Madison, as well as GPS Dairy Consultant Paul Dyk. Luiz and Paul are going to get into a conversation that he shared today on maximizing milk components by feeding high-quality corn silage. Hear about the details of his work as well as some of the research coming out of his department at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Enjoy this conversation with Luiz and Paul.
Hey Luiz, it's good to be able to sit down with you. We appreciate coming to the Leaders Forum this year. We appreciate all the information that you're presenting to us. I thought it'd be kind of fun to do a little bit of a follow-up on some of your presentations, a little bit what you're seeing in the field. So tell me a little bit about corn silage these days. What are things that producers should be looking for? What's the key attributes that, if I'm a producer, I should be thinking about?
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me here this week. Great event. Very exciting to be here and be able to follow up on some of our discussions. With regards to corn silage, obviously there are a lot of things that we can consider.
Yep.
From a nutrition perspective. The three main things that I always suggest people to target for would be high fiber digestibility, high starch digestibility, and proper particle size to make sure first you maintain rumen health, but at the same time you allow cows to consume enough of the diet without causing issues with rumen fuel.
Tell me a little more about the fiber digestibility. What are kind of some numbers that they should be looking at? What are things that producers and their nutritionists should be thinking about?
Yeah, the main indicators for fiber digestibility would be obviously NDFD, right, or NDF digestibility that will be analyzed in vitro primarily, or TT NDFD, depending on the laboratory that you use. And our goal is to have a higher values, right? So basically, if you use average values for the US, fiber would probably be around 55 to 60% NDFD. We want to try to push the number a little bit higher than that. With regards to other indicators, I always suggest people to pay attention to lignin as well as UNDF. UNDF is a laboratory assay that takes 240 hours to show us the NDF that is not digested during that time. And the goal with those numbers is to have a very low number.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about how high do we want to go. I think a lot of us look at this 30-hour NDFD. A lot of us have trained our clients to kind of key in on that number. What's the number that you've been seeing here in the Midwest? What are good numbers? I mean, you gave me an average of 55 to 60, but what would be a good number that they would like to see?
Oh, we are seeing numbers sometimes as high as 65, 70%.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously, there are a lot of factors that may impact that, and not every corn silage can reach those numbers. But if you can get close to that, I think those would be outstanding numbers to help with cow performance.
Some of the numbers that I've seen from BMR, we've seen numbers that hit 71, 72, and we're even seeing numbers that hit higher. Can we be too high?
You could be too high. Definitely BMR is one of those opportunities we have to improve fiber digestibility that can go that high. I don't think there is a number that you could say, hey, I don't want to have the silage, right? Because the most digestible, the better, in my opinion, because it allows you to establish higher forage diets, right? And the higher the forage diet, then you kind of, I'm going to say, balance with the fact that the cow is eating more because the materials stay a little bit longer in the rumen compared to a low forage diet. However, when you reach a very high digestibility like that, the passage rate could be very fast. So diet formulation, like adding some of the other forages to kind of slow down a little bit passage rate while maintaining good digestibility could play a major role under those conditions.
The last couple of years we've seen low lignin alfalfa. So I know it talks about corn silage, but you can't take it out of context. We've seen low lignin alfalfa. We've seen some people growing grasses. And can we combine those with BMR, or is that too much rocket fuel?
Yeah, that's a great question. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of research related to that. I'm aware of one study that actually fed conventional corn silage and BMR in addition to conventional alfalfa and low lignin alfalfa.
Yeah.
And Unfortunately for this study, we didn't see all the benefits on fiber digestibility from both sides. So I thought we would have a nice answer for that, but unfortunately we could not. And just to give proper credit, that's a study conducted by Ken Kauscher at the Dairy Ford Center.
Oh, nice. Okay. One of the big focus has been on dairies is really about components in terms of, we get caught up with percent fats, but I would say this fall we've seen some amazing butter fats, 4.4s, 4.5s, and combined with high production. What are those dairies doing, or what do they need to do if for other dairies that aren't there? How does corn silage play into that?
Yeah, corn silage plays a major role. Obviously, opportunities to improve fiber digestibility helps with intake, and usually cows consuming more, it leads to greater energy-corrected milk. So consequently, you're going to see some of those higher component yields. The other opportunities that are there are good formulation associated with particle size. With particle size, we want that to be coarse enough to make sure the rumen is very healthy, so you don't have any issues with lower rumen pH, which could cause lower milk fat. But at the same time, you want to make sure that that's not too coarse, so the cow can actually consume enough of that and rest enough because of how those physical characteristics change cow behavior. Other opportunities associated with that is try to combine the diet with your nutritional management. Herds that have a very good nutritional management, like feeding multiple times a day, very good schedule for push-ups, no high competition at the feed bunk, usually those herds have a much higher milk fat compared to herds that have issues with their nutritional management.
For a long time, we've thought of higher butter fats associated with maybe higher forages, but it seems like just getting carbs in there to have enough energy supply, enough MP, is the other part to that. So how do we think about that?
Absolutely. I think we can have both, right? If you have a very good corn silage, for example, high starch and high fiber digestibility, high starch digestibility and high fiber digestibility, you can reach those numbers because those carbohydrates will be available there for the dairy cow to utilize as a very good energy source at the same time that you are maintaining very good health. We conducted a study last summer removing some of the corn silage from the diet and adding soy hulls. And then we adjusted the diet with high moisture corn so we could have exactly the same amount of digestible starch, just to understand how the NDF source plays a role for the dairy cow. And just for reference, we decreased from a 20% forage NDF diet to a 16% forage NDF diet. And what we saw is that the moment we added more byproducts to the diet and very fastly degradable, the cows start eating more, and they did produce more milk, but they didn't produce more energy-corrected milk. So as we start going through all the data and calculating feed efficiency, the high forage diets or normal forage diets, depending on how you consider our formulation, they actually were more efficient than when we added more byproducts to the
So
diet.
you brought in soy hulls, and at the same time, did starch go down as well at that point when you brought the soy hulls in? Or
We decided to add some extra high moisture corn, so this way the level of starch was the same.
Yeah.
Because we didn't want to have the confounding factor of starch to understand how those different NDF sources play a role. Obviously,
So you had some soy hulls and high moisture corn replace corn silage, just essentially what you were doing, yeah.
correct, yes.
So you got no more energy corrected milk. So your conclusion out of that was it would have been better just to feed more corn silage.
Under those specific conditions, yes, right? I guess the other question we would have is, what if instead of removing corn silage, we were adding more, right?
Yeah.
Would we see the same response? I'm not so sure, right?
So one of the things in the Midwest obviously is there's a bit of a question about base in terms of how much milk we can ship. So when you had that scenario and you put more soy hulls and high moisture corn in, did the energy corrected milk was the same, but did we have a lower volume of fluid milk? I mean, could we ship more milk because we had a lower fluid amount, or how did that look?
So basically the fluid amount was higher actually for the soy hull diet, I think by 2.5 pounds, but the energy corrected milk was not. So yes, you could ship more milk, and if you're paid by fluid, definitely would be a good strategy. If you're paid by energy corrected milk, then I think that a high forage diet would be the best option because of the efficiency.
The GPS Dairy Consulting team is growing and is looking for people that can be a part of the journey. A successful GPS Dairy Consultant is someone that is self-driven and loves to learn. It's an individual with a progressive mindset and one that is very entrepreneurial. Most importantly, GPS Dairy Consultants believe in teamwork and supporting one another. Does this sound like you? Collaboration is the business's horsepower, and it's the reason behind the success of our consultants. To learn more about joining GPS Dairy Consulting LLC, talk to any GPS consultant. Visit gpsdairy.com or email our team directly to contact@gpsdairy.com.
One of the things that we've gone through cornstarch harvest season, and that's been a couple months ago, and a lot of producers are getting into their new corn silage. And as nutritionists, we're always looking at corn silage. We have it in our hand, we're looking at it, and we're saying, hey, is it the right length? And we know Penn State Shaker Box has been out there for 25 years or whatever it's been there. What's your thought process, and how should we look at corn silage? I mean, how do we know if the length is right? What's your measurement? What's your ideal? Do we have a Wisconsin State Shaker Box yet?
We don't have a Wisconsin State Shaker Box, but there is the Wisconsin Oscillator particle separator. Unfortunately, that's a mechanical separator that we cannot actually carry on farm. But I actually use that a lot for research because I enjoy seeing those different sieves, as well as, the easiness of running using a mechanical separator that sometimes is more consistent. But going back to your initial point, I do think that there are ideal considerations for particle sizing forages. I think it's quite dependent on your scenario, right? At the end of the day, it has to be a combination of the different forages you have available, as well as how high in rapidly degradable carbohydrates your diet will be. But for corn silage, we collaborated in a project in Brazil a couple years ago. And basically what they did, they used the Penn State particle separator to actually separate particles before feeding cows.
Right.
So they basically had two bunkers, one that we used for the basal corn silage, which was about 17% NDF of the diet. And then they separated the other part into particles greater than the 19 millimeter sieve, or the top sieve of the particle separator, particles between the 19 millimeter and 8 millimeter, which is the second sieve, and then everything below that as the third part.
Yep.
And then they ensiled those in drums so they could feed up to 9% NDF coming from those fractions.
Yep.
And then they use dehydrated corn as a proxy for high moisture corn that they have in Brazil to compensate for the differences in starch.
Yep.
So the nutrient composition was exactly the same. What I thought would happen is the 8 millimeter sieve would be better.
Yeah.
The 19 millimeter sieve would cause sorting.
Yeah.
And the particles below the 8 millimeter sieve, they would not be effective at all.
Right.
I was partially right and partially wrong. Okay.
Well, it's good, and you weren't totally wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was quite happy with that. I was right about the 19 millimeter sieve. It did cause more sorting,
Yep.
and consequently was not as effective fiber as we wish it would be.
Yep.
So the first conclusion we had for that is that formulating diets based on that sieve could be dangerous, because if the cows do not consume, then the diet goes completely wrong, right? Including rumen pH, lower milk fat, and so on.
Yeah, and that's a relief to hear, because I think a lot of myself and others included, we kind of ignore that top screen at this point. We almost throw that one out because we don't think it's very useful. But that middle screen, which would be the 8 millimeter, has some. But you were saying there was another one, a 17 in there. Is that what I heard you say?
No, 17% NDF was the basal corn silage that we add to the diet.
Yeah.
Because this way, what we did is we had a controlled diet with at least a reasonable amount of forage NDF,
Right.
and then we just add some extra so we could actually test those different sieves for effectiveness. But some of the discussions that we see across the U.S. is, okay, how do we use the 1.18 millimeter sieve that now was replaced by a 4 millimeter sieve?
Yeah.
How effective are those? And I never thought those would be effective at all. But what the research shows is that for some of those particles, it was actually effective, which I was wrong about.
Yeah.
And it's definitely not as effective.
And
as
that's going to catch some soy hulls and stuff, right? I mean, for the nutritionist, it's not the metal screen. It's the new plastic one that has it's a 4 millimeter. Of course, we're talking metric here, but yes, it is a different screen. A lot of people don't have that one if they have an old shaker box.
Right.
Thus the need for a Wisconsin shaker box.
Absolutely.
That doesn't have a top one, right? The 3-screen Wisconsin one. Is that ever something we'll see, a different shaker box that would be a little more, because I'm not sure the top one means anything anymore. I just not sure it's useful.
Yeah, I don't think we will ever remove that sieve from the measurement, because at the end of the day, if you have anything on top, you should at least have an idea for sorting.
Yeah.
Right, so it could provide a good tool for field evaluation of diets.
So
and
instead
so
of
on.
seeing it as a positive, we actually might see it as a negative.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hey, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and if you think about it, those sieves, regardless if you use the metal sieve or the new plastic
Well-
sieve, that material is still helpful. But as you said, because it catch particles like soy hulls and other concentrates, you have to be careful because those are not as effective. They pass as faster, though the corn silage particles will pass faster through the rumen, and obviously the byproducts do not have the same effectiveness. But it's still, we can consider that helps a little bit. So.
Yeah, for a few minutes more here, what I would like to do is kind of roll into a couple of the questions I have about yourself and in your research program. How long have you been at Madison now?
I came back to Madison in 2020, so a little bit more than 3 years and a half.
3 years. So tell me, what kind of research have you been working on, and what should we expect to see in the next 3-4 years?
Yeah, absolutely. The three main focus that we have right now are first, continue to understand silage fermentation, both corn silage as well as alfalfa. So we are trying to understand, different scenarios that people see very commonly in the field with good and bad fermentation. And our goal for the future would be to continue to understand those and hopefully see if there are other metrics we can incorporate to predict some of the bad scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
The second main area would be understanding the utilization of starch and fiber for dairy cows, not only from silage quality perspective, but also diet formulation. So we have been working, like I gave the example of replacing corn silage with soy hulls. We start testing again, replacing high moisture corn with soy hulls, because now we also want to measure some of the methane emissions associated with that, because now we have a couple green feeds that allow us to do that in our research facility. And the third, and in my opinion, the most exciting thing for me, because I enjoy doing that, is the development of some tools that people can use in the field. The first one, which I think is very close, is an update of the milk model, because we want to make sure we bring new equations so people can better predict energy value of corn silage and see what that would be. But together with that, we also want to have a couple other spreadsheets so people can simulate scenarios like, okay, if I store silage for 6 instead of 4 months, what is going to happen to my corn silage? And then they can start thinking, is it worth for me to invest in something like that? Or alternatively, I want to increase shop height, but I know I will be losing some yield because of that. Is the benefit of fiber digestibility is strong enough to justify losing that yield? So that's the type of thing that we want to work a little bit more the next few years to make sure that we can deliver some of those tools so people can make more informed decisions, if you will.
It's a great question, because a lot of dairies, they have expanded. They go from 1,000 to 2,000, and now they're using the same facilities they had before, the storage, and they're asking the question, all right, is 60 days okay? Is 50 days okay? No, I want 4 months. But so what? You want me to spend how much money to put up more storage? What's the return going to be? It needs to be a big return, because it costs a lot of money to put the new pad out there. So how, what are the economics of that? So that's going to be fun research to hear about and to kind of see where that goes.
Yeah,
so
thank you. We're excited for that, and I highly agree with you. At the end of the day, we try to showcase some of the key management practice, but we do understand that every dairy has their unique challenge, and that's how it should be decided first, right? What we have going on and what we can actually do before making any crazy investments that may not be worth. So I highly agree with you there.
Yeah, so thank you very much. And we do appreciate you coming in, and thank you for all the work that you're doing. We're looking forward to having many conversations with you. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And, anytime I'll be happy to showcase anything we are doing. And if anybody that, is listening to the podcast has questions, feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
You just heard from Luiz Ferraretto from University of Wisconsin-Madison and GPS dairy consultant Paul Dyk. Thank you for joining us on this GPS DairyCast. I'm your GPS DairyCast host, Peggy Coffeen from the Up Level Dairy Podcast, and thank you for listening.
The GPS DairyCAST features conversations that deliver on the GPS Dairy Consulting promise to inspire change and grow leaders. If this GPS DairyCAST has you looking for more ways to become an elite dairy producer, find more information in our show notes on how you can add a GPS advisor to your team.